Hello everybody and welcome to our live session. My name is Ivan Brehm and this is our head chef Ashley. And today we'll be cooking a dish that's inspired by a traditional Italian dish known as Chicken Cacciatore. But before we get into it, a little brief conversation about who I am and where we're at. My name is Ivan, as I mentioned. I'm a Brazilian-born chef. I've been in Singapore for 11 years and currently I'm cooking inside our research and development kitchen on the second floor of restaurant Nouri. The space here is called Appetite. Appetite's a pretty kind of wicked space. It's a combination of an art gallery, a music venue, and also a research and development space. It's also an F&B space too, and if you want to come down and have a couple of snacks or just a long meal, you can. We cook food that is based on the intersection of cultures, essentially trying to find what are the parallels that exist between our different cultures and make dishes about those parallels. We call this act crossroad cooking, and the act of thinking like this, crossroads thinking. It sounds very complicated, but essentially we're just trying to see how is it that we eat similarly around the world. And because of that reason, the dish we're going to make today is a dish inspired by a chicken cacciatore, but that uses very similar taste profiles to our palate here in Singapore and Southeast Asia, where we actually swapped the traditional tomatoes and olives of a cacciatore for a rumpa-based sauce and a little praline made of peanuts. And for those purposes, we'll be using this very nifty piece of kit. All of the recipes will be uploaded onto the platform later, so if you want, you can have a look at them. But we'll do our best to give as much detail as we can today. I'm from Brazil, as I mentioned, and as a very young country, much similar to Singapore, we are very much the product of what immigrants brought to our space. And so I'm always very excited when I can make a dish that reminds us of how important it is to keep our borders open, to keep people talking and exchanging knowledge and information all the time. And so without further ado, we're going to start cooking the dish of not a chicken cacciatore. There's a couple of processes there. We're going to show you first how to make polenta using a Thermomix. For most of our guests there who are unaware of what polenta is traditionally made with cornmeal, a very coarse flour made of corn that is quite common in places like Italy, Spain, and Portugal. Normally polenta is very tricky to make in the stove. It requires a substantial amount of stirring, otherwise the corn goes to the bottom and sticks to the bottom of the pan. But obviously in the Thermomix the process is rendered incredibly fast and easy. And so once we make the polenta, we will also be making basil oil, and I'll share a couple of tips on how to get your basil oil and your herb oils to stay as green as these guys over here. This is the finished product that I'll show you how to obtain today. And then in addition to that, we're going to make a small batch of rumpa, essentially a sofrito of sorts. You know, the Italians will call a rumpa a sofrito, the stir fry of aromatics there. And we'll make a rumpa using balachan and shallots, a very basic one that you can keep in the fridge for a while or freeze it and use it for 1,000 other applications whenever you want. In addition to this, we're also going to make peanut praline, and we're going to poach a chicken breast using the nifty Thermomix. So without further ado, let's get going. So to start with the polenta recipe, we essentially add about 50 grams of polenta and a combination of 225 grams of milk and 225 grams of water. And I'll also add the nifty butterfly attachment, which will help kind of scrape the sides of the pot or the bowl Thermomix. So the main bit here is we're going to have to cook this for about 2 hours. I'm going to start with the maximum amount here that I can, which is 99 minutes. And then we'll cook this at 90 degrees Celsius. Initially, at around 2. Now, what we're looking for in the end is a polenta that is fully hydrated and incredibly creamy. You'll be surprised with the look. We'll finish cooking this at the back in just 1 second, but a couple of quick words there. You want to minimize the speed of the blade so that you're not splashing everything all over the place. And after a while, you can lower the speed And that process will also help the polenta stay creamy. If it's beating too fast, there's a likelihood that you'll kind of split your polenta. And so never go above 2. And as you get closer and closer to a finished product, lower your speed even to 1.5 or something like this. The process will take around 1.5 hours to 2, depending on the amount you're making. We're making a small 50-gram batch. If you were making a slightly larger batch, I would obviously increase the time. And you can tell the process already started, it's steaming, and things already come together quite quickly. For now, we're going to leave this cook. I'm going to pass this down to Ashley so we can cook this in the other Thermomix. Thank you. We can carry on with business as usual. Alrighty, so today I want to talk also a little bit about herb oils. Quite a lot of our cooking uses a lot of herb oils actually. I'm a big fan of herbs in general. What's not to love, right? All these spikes of flavor are really what's exciting about eating for me. And in the context of today, when we're making a Thai basil and Italian basil oil, marrying both the origin of the recipe and where we are, I wanted also to talk a little bit about how to make great quality herb oils and how to store them. Most people have problems with herb oils after blending them, that generally they last for about a day or 2 in the fridge and turn brown quite often. Or sometimes they're green but have very little flavor, and I think all of that can be remedied if you know what you're doing. Addressing the color is the most important bit. I think for green herb oils, it sounds counterintuitive, but you actually need to cook the herb a bit. There's a couple of ways of going about this. In the restaurant where we're making large batches, we would actually blanch all of these herbs in water for a very quick second, and then squeeze the additional water out, and then blend that with oil. And the blanching does something that we will do here with the Thermomix in one full swoop. It locks in, or essentially disables, an enzyme that attacks the chlorophyll of the product and oxidizes the chlorophyll. And so if you were to take a green herb and just bruise it, the green herb would oxidize. But if you were to take the same herb, blanch it, and then bruise it, the green herb would stay green. And that's really because there's an enzymatic process that is disabled, and when you kill that enzyme, the herb stays green for longer. And it works for all green vegetables and also for green herbs. And so the process that we will embark on today will manage to lock in that color. The second bit, the taste problem, right? A lot of the herb oils have a very interesting color, but they're quite weak on the palate, and that's really a factor of the ratio of herbs to oil. And so we use an incredibly large ratio, and it makes the oil more expensive, but it also makes the oil a lot tastier, and so you need less to actually plate your dish and finish your product than you would if you had a lot of oil that didn't taste like much. And so we use a 1.5 to 1 ratio, that is 1.5 of oil to 1 of herb, and you can play with that if you'd like to make the product a little bit cheaper, but at the same time I don't recommend, because you can use less oil to obtain what you want. These oils are incredibly versatile. They can be kept in the freezer, so you literally just take your final product and put them in a Ziploc bag, or 2 or 3, however many you want it, and you keep them frozen until you want them. And in the fridge they will last without compromise in taste for about 7 days without a problem. At the restaurant we use these oils all the time, and so this is very much a process that many Michelin star restaurants would be using. Here we have a combined amount of Thai basil and Italian basil. And here we have grapeseed oil. Now, a little note on the oil you use. Obviously the quality matters a lot. And I see a lot of people using extra virgin olive oil to make herb oils. I don't recommend that. You're ruining both products. The olive oil, which will end up oxidizing because of the heat, and the herb oil, which now will taste a lot like oxidized olive oil and no longer will taste like herb oil. And so using a neutral oil is really important. We like grapeseed specifically because it is very neutral. It doesn't taste like much. And from a viscosity standpoint, it's quite fluid. It's not an oil that in the fridge hardens very fast, like olive oil, for example, would. And so for that purpose, we're using extra virgin grapeseed oil. Pick your herbs so that you don't have stems, okay? A little bit of stem is no big deal. And so I have 110 grams here. important. I'm going to stay here. Alrighty. Now, for the first part of the process, you literally spin this quite fast. This is a good time for you to bring in your spatula and just literally push the product down and start over. You can use this oil to season your tomato and mozzarella salad. You can put it on top of a nasi lemak. It actually tastes delicious. You can do whatever you want with the oil. It's super versatile. Now we're going to blend for a while. Okay, so we have essentially spun this oil at 9 speed for 2 minutes. The purpose is to really crush all of the herbs. And we're just going to, now that the herbs are nicely pureed, and you can see just by the lid, they have a pretty nice and thick paste of herb there in oil mix. We're literally going to push all of this down to the blade. And we're going to spin this again, now at a lower speed. So once the oil is ready, we're going to literally put it through a cheesecloth into a bowl, okay? But what you will end up acquiring is not just this beautiful oil, but a combination of oil and water. And here is the most crucial part of making a herb oil. Failure to separate the oil from the water is what will compromise the quality of your product. You need to take the water out of your oil. The water is what oxidizes the oil. It is what turns brown, and it's what starts tasting a little funky after a couple of days. And if you manage to separate them neatly, you'll end up with a very pure oil. You discard the water, and you can freeze your oil and keep it for a long time. And so, to show you the best technique to do this, you don't need much. It's really a Ziploc bag. In this case, we're using a vacuum pack bag. And you put all of those contents, and you literally just dangle it. We're using a clip here, and we just dangle this from the fridge. The temperature is going to start to thicken the oil, right? Because the oil will start to set a little bit, and that will facilitate the separation. And this has just been in the fridge for maybe less than 20 minutes, and you can already see this separation here, where all the oil on top and all the water in the bottom. From here, the easiest process is to literally just make a very thin cut with a pair of scissors, and then when the water stops flowing and oil starts to come out, you just plug it, and there you go. You have a really clean oil in your bag that you can transfer to multiple bags, put it in the freezer, and preserve. This is a pretty interesting technique that could also be mimicked with a squeezy bottle if you have one at home. You just put cling film in your squeezy bottle so that it doesn't go anywhere. And then you do the same process in the fridge upside down, and then you remove the cling film and let it drip out. But this is a lot easier. Alrighty. So you will also notice that the herb oil mixture is very loose now. It's not as thick as it was when we had green, just fresh herbs pulverized. It's very kind of sloppy jalopy. That's a technical term. Now, before we move on, just a couple of more words. You can tell the herb oil is already collecting at the bottom of this. Right? Nice and green, a very vibrant green. Once the oil is passed all the way through, you still have the pulp to use, and the pulp is delicious too. You can use this in a range of things. You can actually blend this with cheese and pine nuts and make a pesto and throw it in your pasta. Actually, this is really good with like nasi ulam and things like this, because you have a very fragrant kind of kick there from the basil. It's very versatile, and if you don't know what to do, it's always good to just freeze it anyway, because an opportunity will present itself. Marinades for chicken, for fish, you name it. These are very flavorful products. So for our next step, we're going to make praline. The praline is a nut paste, and you can make it from a variety of nuts. You can actually make it from other types of seeds as well, a sesame or sunflower seed praline. They're equally delicious. But in this case, we're going to make a peanut praline. Now, we make our pralines, depending on the use, slightly different. Normally, you just roast nuts and then blend them in the Thermomix, and they would literally work incredibly well. But we want to make a chunky praline with a hint of sweetness there. And for that reason, we actually, after toasting the nuts, coated the nuts in a syrup that is made with a very special sugar that you can find if you are used to buying things online or sometimes in health food stores. It's a sugar called tree halos, which is slightly less sweet than normal sugar, but also has other properties there. It resists water better than sugar, and so your praline stays crunchier for longer. And so these nuts right here, coated, are also really nice to snack on as a bar snack. There is a recipe of equal parts tree halos to water. The sugar is here, and you literally just melt those in a pot. Add toasted nuts, so I would take these blanched peanuts and just toast them first, so develop a little bit more flavor. Add them and cook them in the syrup until the syrup is reduced enough that the nut starts to crystallize in the pan. Once the nuts started to crystallize in the pan, you just remove them, you let them cool, and you fry them. And that is why they sound so crunchy, you know? It is the frying of the nut. Now, every time that we blend this, we'll end up with a really nice paste, very fragrant, but also with hints of like chunky peanuts that have become kind of crunchy because of the treatment we just gave. We're now going to blend this. Alrighty, so 250 grams of nuts in total. I would say for this, we want to add maybe 10% the weight of oil. So I also use grapeseed oil here. Oil is going to help the nuts blend. The process now is to literally blend this as fast as we can to begin, and then allow everything to kind of crush nicely. No heat needed. There's enough friction. You might have to push this down a few times, and you'll notice when I started blending, you blend it progressively, not all the way up. Otherwise, you just splatter too much stuff on the sides there. So go slow at first and increase your speed slowly, but do get it high up there. And let's go back again. All right, so the result should be like a smooth base with some crunchy pieces inside of it. And I think we achieved that. And you can see on camera, they have a few of the little pieces of that brittle essentially. And so we're just going to pour that aside. And as I mentioned, this can be kept in the freezer because of the tree halos. I wouldn't keep it for longer than a month though. Thank you. So for the last two processes, we're poaching chicken and we're also making a rampa. Now here I understand there are different recipes and varieties of rampa to make. We're making a very simple one with a very good quality belachan. These are Korean chili flakes that we're going to add towards the end of the mixture. This shallot and a little bit more grapeseed oil. And the process is quite simple. We're literally going to grind everything in the Thermomix. The products are already weighed. You can do this off on a stove or an oven. We use a blowtorch, but this is also an important part of the process. To toast your belachan, actually extract quite a lot more flavor out of it, and you add some toasted notes. You could, in theory, put this whole nugget in the oven. You can also break it. Now, when it's warmed, it's a little more supple. And you can break this and continue the process of toasting it. All these little lightly burnt and caramelized bits there are going to add a nice dimension of taste there to your sambal. Cool. So this is weighed out. About 200 grams of shallots and 17 grams of belachan. And then to that, we're going to add around 100 grams of grapeseed oil. Cool. You want to make sure the shallots are completely blended and that the belachan is blended also into the mixture. You will start with a really white kind of paste, okay? And you can choose to actually add the butterfly attachment here, which is what I'm going to do, to just keep things mixing. And we're going to cook this puppy right inside the Thermomix. We use 100 degrees Celsius. So with the butterfly attachment on, I'd say maybe speed 1 or 1.5. Keeping in mind that the higher your speed with the butterfly attachment, the higher the evaporation, so your product actually cooks a little faster. It's not necessarily a good thing here. It's important also to keep the lid open so the product doesn't steam inside of the jug. So in the interest of time, we're going to just move along. This is a version that we've made earlier. It's literally the same product. In the last maybe 5 minutes of cooking, we added the chili. So you can see the red color from the Korean chili. And obviously the onions have caramelized into a really nice and complex caramel. This product's a little far away, so we're going to let it cook and do its thing. But we're going to use this belachan rampa. Now, quick note about the belachan rampa. If you cover this with oil a little bit, you can store this in the fridge for a while. I'd say anywhere from 7 to 10 days. This is cooked for a prolonged period of time and the oil is going to protect it from oxidizing. If you intend on keeping this for longer, you can also freeze this in little Tupperwares or tubs, and you can use it willy-nilly whenever you want to. As a last-minute addition, do things like stocks and sauces delicious on your rice if you're doing a fried rice. And you can use this as a base for a ton of other sambals there. A fresh sambal, a cooked sambal. At the restaurant in the past, we used to just take a portion of this plus chilies and a little bit of lemongrass and a tiny bit of tamarind and just make a version of a sambal with some lime leaves. And so those tastes you can play around with at home and figure out one version that works best for you. We will use this to coat the chicken slices. And once the chicken slices are actually fully coated, we'll make a little salad of tomatoes, limes, and chili. A little bit of lime leaf and a few bits of herbs and flowers, just for the extra little touch right at the end of the dish. All right, and so for the last process before we start plating, we're going to cook the chicken breast sous vide. Now, this is a good quality kampong chicken. It comes from just across the border in Malaysia, and it's an organic bird. And we prefer birds that are free of antibiotics and growth hormones. The better quality chicken you use, the better the result of the product's going to be. You can use the same process for chicken thighs, except the cooking technique's going to be slightly different. The temperature is going to be slightly higher and for a longer period of time. So only use this technique for breast with the times and temperatures as I discussed now. And after I remove the chicken breast from the chicken, we actually put it into a salt brine, essentially a combination of water and salt at 3%. So for every 3 grams of salt, we do 100 grams of water. And so that 3% brine solution actually makes the chicken stay a lot moister. It pre-seasons the chicken too, so that you don't have to put salt on top afterwards. But the biggest advantage is really in the moisture control. The chicken, because of osmosis, loses a lot less liquid during the cooking process, a lot juicier for longer. And so to cook this, we're using the Thermomix with the blade cover. You can use a Ziploc bag and a bowl of water to remove all the air, and you can watch a few videos on YouTube online. It's quite easy to do. Once you have the product inside the bag, here is a great opportunity actually, before you vacuum it, to add maybe a lime leaf or actually the rumpa base, or maybe a little bit of butter, salt, any other types of aromatics, and this will help flavor the chicken. And so we have the bath preset to 60 degrees Celsius, and we're literally going to arrange this single portion of chicken breast inside the water. It will cook for about 30 minutes. It's also very important to highlight that when you're dealing with low temperature cooking in fish and chicken and meats in general, that you have to be very attentive to doneness of products, and you need to make sure that you're cooking things to a safe level. In the context of how we process this bird, we want to cook the chicken to 60 degrees Celsius, which is very safe for this particular product. And so we will close this and start the cooking process. We have made this before, and so Ashley at the back will start searing the chicken breast that we cooked earlier on, so we can proceed to doing our last part of the process, which is plating up. See? Alrighty. So a couple of good practices there to keep your product safe and also as delicious as it can be. Once you finish cooking your chicken breast, you don't have to serve it straight away. You can actually store that bag in the fridge and use it on a later date. The product will still be good for a couple of days inside the bag. I wouldn't push it, but 2 to 3 days is perfectly safe. And the best way to actually cool the chicken once it's been cooked is it's to use a technique that we call 3-stage cooling. Essentially allowing the chicken to cool slowly allows also for the chicken to reabsorb some of the juices that were let go during the cooking process. And so it's a very simple process that actually requires you to remove the chicken from the cooking vessel, put it on the bench, allow it to sit there for about 10 minutes, also completely safe. To take that and put it into tap water, just a bowl with tap water for another 10 minutes, and then to add ice. And these, it sounds like a lot, but these 3 little processes, the room temperature cool, the normal water, and the ice water, ensures that the chicken retains a lot of its juice and is very, very interesting as far as texture is concerned. It's a delicious product. And when you're searing the chicken for serving, you can actually sear that product from cold, which allows you the opportunity to get nice and brown on the chicken breast there without compromising its doneness, okay? So Ashley has just finished searing this chicken, and what we will essentially do is in a bowl, we will combine a little portion of the belachan, a little bit of lime leaves, a tiny amount of our crunchy praline, and then we'll make a little salad on the side. And then we'll also finish the polenta, which should be cooked by now. And so I'll go get the polenta and we'll get going. Okay, so over here we have the polenta just about to finish. This has been a total of 2 hours cooking. And we're going to do a quick close-up of what it actually looks like, just so you have an idea. And now that the polenta is finished, we're actually going to add a little bit of butter and Parmesan cheese just to season it, a touch of salt, and it's done. And while it's spinning, I would add maybe 20 grams of butter, and then after this, we'll add a little bit of Parmesan cheese. Remember to only add salt afterwards. I'm doing all of this by eye, but I'd venture a guess it's about 25 grams of Parmesan as well. Once everything is blended in, proceed to plating. Spatula. If you would like your product to be smoother, you can always pass this through a chinois or a strainer, but we actually like the little pieces of the corn grits in there, keeping in mind that we use fine grits, and so they're very small and just add a nice little textural element there. And so to finish this, we're going to just cut the chicken into nice little chunky pieces. So all of this gets put in a bowl. A little bit of the Belachan rampa and the oil is added to the mix. And you just want this to coat. And so a nice little dollop of the polenta is added. And to that, we're literally just going to balance the chicken. And last minute, we'll just make the fastest salad the world's ever seen. A very small amount of red chili. Spring onions. And just a very small amount of lime leaf. Cut as fine as you can. Lemon juice. Lots, and then a little bit of the basil oil. And salt. Right on the side, a nice dollop of this peanut sambal, or peanut praline, and a little bit of flowers. I'm gonna use these chai flowers today. Cool, there you go. Chicken cacciatore done our way. Enjoy. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick tutorial. Lots of little interesting processes and tips there, and I can't wait to see what you guys do with the information you acquired today. This was not a chicken cacciatore or a chicken cacciatore done Ivan's way. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you later.